Hello again, everyone. It is your favorite comic book reviewer turned pompous artist here with or should I say, an art review on Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, more particularly the chapter with Endul. And I suppose art review isn't the right word for it because I'm not going to be reviewing the art more than I'm going to be breaking down the kind of key aspects and interesting things that I've noticed in Araki's style and his ability to illustrate panel to panel artwork in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, particularly in his earlier style from Stardust Crusaders. So hopefully you'll learn something along the way while I dissect this artwork. And yeah, so let's begin. So the chapter that I'm going to be going over is going to be, as you can see here, Iggy the Fool and Geb and Duel, where at this point in the battle, Jotaro has already snuck up on Endul and is now behind him. And they're going to have their kind of duel, which is kind of the interesting part of the manga. So, just to start out, we have two big panels to open with, which in the shonen type of publishing, it's week to week. So, the first page of most of Araki's manga typically starts off exactly where the last page left off, but a little bit like a mini recap. So we have Geb sitting here in, of course, your typical JoJo pose fashion, but on this bottom panel, uh, the choice of illustration is to focus less in with straight lines on Jotaro and use more cross hatching in his clothing and everything that he's wearing to kind of illustrate a gray tonality, of course, using the screen tones as well for this. And that is something that can easily be used to differentiate the foreground and the background. In this case, it's the ominous nature of Jotaro standing over Endul as he's looking for him. So that's a really useful technique, especially whenever you're illustrating in the black and white medium, to use the gray tones as a way to separate the foreground and the background. And in this case, put Jotaro a little bit more in shadow as he is, well, you know, he's almost what's the word that I'm looking for? This guy doesn't know he's there, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And so eventually, he does figure out that Jotaro's right behind him. And that's whenever Araki starts, not only with Iggy's cute little reaction to everything, but he starts with the intense dialogue, the intense setting with his sound effects going by, but more particularly, the dropping of the cane. And that kind of signifies tension and time. It tells you how short a time period is from when they start here to the end of the duel. And you obviously have a slow build-up here from panel to panel as the characters are talking. Jotaro's kind of standing silently as he does. And that's whenever the cane comes into play. The second that it drops, Jotaro immediately has a reaction in black, which the black contrast background to the screen toned face is a really good way of kind of showing shock or making it stand out among the rest of the panels for an emotional reaction, which is very important to manga as a whole. This also being shown in Endul's face as the cane begins to drop. So panel by panel, you see this cane dropping. Well, in real time, it's dropping as fast as any cane you kind of expect to drop. Iggy adding to the intensity with his little reactions that he has. So going into the next page, the cane is continuing to drop, and you see it slowly dropping, with Jotaro still standing over him. More sound effects involved, and the background kind of getting fuzzier than it usually is. And it's just kind of this power stance where, despite the fact that Jotaro is clearly in the upper hand here, and Duel is still calm enough that there's still that tension there that keeps on building. The kind of shattered glass whenever Iggy finally reacts to everything. And one of the key points in Araki's artwork is his use of speed lines, which I personally like a lot more than a lot of other artists because to me, it's very unique and fitting to his style, unlike some of the other manga artists out there. Which me personally, I don't like the manga style too much, but I've been drawn to Araki because of a lot of his influences. So, regardless, the use of his speed lines here to illustrate the positive and negative values, which you typically illustrate with either just plain black, you fill it in with plain black and you use lines to outline everything. Instead, he turns all that into individual lines coming out of it, pointing towards a certain direction to completely illustrate the flow of motion and even flow in the panel. In this case, you have a spiritual being like Star Platinum coming out of Jotaro with the whiteout and different paint splatters around it, not only to illustrate the motion, but to illustrate kind of the power and the finesse that whenever it's happening. If anybody's watched the anime, then you kind of know know what I mean there. And in this instance, Araki illustrates both of them drawing their hand, both of them drawing the gun at the exact same time. He obviously leaves Jotaro out of this one for the reason that, well, if he shows you there, then there's not going to be as much tension. Here, the cane is finally going to hit the ground, and it's just a page turner. You really want to turn the page. You really want to see what happens, because I mean, this is just happening so quickly. Illustrated by not only the speed lines, but the fact that the panels are taking up so much space in between, with this still being the timekeeper in the span that, in the time span between the cane being this close to the ground, Jotaro and Endul drawing out their stands, and the cane just barely being even closer. It's not even a blink of an eye in that period of time. So you turn the page and you get this almost full double page spread with this incredible composition, not only illustrating speed, but illustrating Araki's prowess as an artist, being able to fit not only Jotaro's reaction, but most of his upper body, Star Platinum's reaction, and the punch with Endul's upper body, and the water going after Jotaro with a circular composition, which is always a really fun artistic tool to use whenever you're illustrating scenes like this, especially when you want contact on both the characters. So a close up on Endul, you see the blood splattering out of him, and if you were to read this, you for the most part, people read top to bottom. I don't think anybody doesn't, and so that's what you get. You get a top to bottom shot, which is what makes this composition so appealing, because from the top, you immediately see that Endul was the first hit. That's the first thing that your brain registers, and as your eye is guided through the page, not only do you see how he was hit by Star Platinum here, but you also see the water going after Jotaro, and you're like, oh, right, he's gonna get attacked too. So you see that, and you see that it missed, all in the order that Araki wanted you to see, being that you're reading it right to left, and top to bottom. So all in all, your eye is being guided in a complete circular pattern to the stand cry and to the next panel of Endul reacting to getting hit in the chest by Star Platinum. And again, more good use of speed lines here, where instead of focusing so much on the background, he decides to opt to use speed lines in the rest of the paneling, just because that fits the composition more. And you see that none of Star Platinum's little beads that he has on his fist right here are illustrated with circles at all. They're all illustrated simply with the speed lines, which is a little bit crude, as Araki sometimes has more crude illustrations, but nonetheless, your eye sees all of that as moving, and far and you understand far more motion than if he were to have just illustrated circles as the beads, with all of the speed lines following the pattern that the page wants you to follow, the same kind of arc per se, the same curve, with Jotaro standing stoically unfazed by everything, as he usually is, in the face of a seeming victory. Endul gets obviously killed, and Jotaro gets his hat knocked off, which is a first time in the series. Still, again, completely no reaction, just kind of for the sake of his character. Any other character probably would have had some reaction, so that's a little thing for the writing. But in terms of panel to panel, again, this is just an appealing page because of the way that he designed the composition, and it gets everything that it needs to, and it gives you the speed of everything, especially after the last one. And I believe if we turn the page, the cane finally just hits the ground. So all in all, as an illustrator, he demonstrated that all of this, from them drawing out their stands to the punch and the hat being knocked off, happened in between the time that it took the cane to get a few inches off the ground to completely hitting the ground on this final page here. And Duel being knocked over, defeated, and Star Platinum kind of screaming in the stress, I guess, of the situation, with the water stand kind of no longer going on a controlled arc and just being a victim of gravity at this point because his user is pretty much dead. The focus being on Jotaro's hat. Uh, I guess in shock. That's kind of what the exclamation point, if that's what that is, demonstrates. Iggy finally hits the ground. So just another example of how fast this situation occurred. Iggy jumped on this page and he landed on this page, as you can see. So little tidbits like that, if you ever want to illustrate speed, use a timekeeper. You obviously don't have a watch in a comic book, so use something like this, something creative, so that way the reader has a sense of time in between events, especially whenever you want an intense duel like this. You want the reader to understand how quickly these events are occurring, as opposed to, that was a car, as opposed to having to guess as to the time constraints of it. And so for the most part, that was those were the key factors in this chapter, aside from the fact that yeah, I don't know what I was saying. But those were the key artistic factors that I wanted to point out in this chapter, and just another sort of simple little little thing that Araki did here was whenever he starts referring to Dio, obviously you see the expression on Jotaro's face change, with even the way that he illustrates the background change again. He uses black instead of the typical white, and he uses a lot more gray tones on Jotaro's face than in previous panels, even though they're in the desert and things should be extremely bright. This being obviously alluding to the ominous nature of Dio, Jotaro now being in the shadow with well, I guess he always was, but Jotaro being in the shadow with Endul speaking, now that they're being warned of the 9 enemy stand users that they're gonna face in Egypt. Endul being so loyal and almost was it afraid? Oh no, he's not afraid, but being so loyal that he's willing to die for him. Jotaro just having nothing to say about that to the reveal. And in a little bit of respect for Endul for giving him the information but dying almost honorably in that fair duel, you see the soul being drained out of him, and Jotaro somberly looking over him with the cross-hatching used to illustrate what the gray tones were originally used for. But in this case, it's the implication is more that light's shining on him with a little bit of movement in it, as opposed to earlier when it was just kind of static, the rays of the sun being illustrated with gray tones instead. And then you get this nice little shot here that's not even as big as my hand, or like 2 fingers put together, which is a nice little shot of the clouds kind of not reflecting, but blocking the sunlight, and just the rays of the sun over Endul's now grave with his cane. Araki using heavy positive and negative space with the white and the black only being contrasted by the gray sky to kind of illustrate the somber feeling that was going on in this page. And I believe that's pretty much it for it. Then you have Iggy giving him the hat with the gum in it, with his funny little expressions, which could be explained in a whole video in itself. I probably won't, but there is some substance to it, as with a lot of things that Araki does. But here's Jotaro again reminiscing with the black background that is used for the internal kind of dialogue going on, and still kind of coming off of the somber little moment that Araki illustrated with this little scene here. And yeah, I mean, so that's the kind of art analysis, you could call it, on this book. It's a little bit rough right now. I can understand if people think that. I'm still kind of trying to get a feel for it, and you know, the more that I do, I want to try new things with it. But for now, this is kind of all that I'm gonna be able to offer. But regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something, and I hope that you're able to apply some of the ideas that I went over in this video to some of your illustrations and use the cross-hatching methods and use creative compositions to illustrate unorthodox things that you don't usually see, with varying perspectives and always keeping it fresh in your artwork, which is why I want to make these videos, so that way you guys can become better artists and kind of understand the medium better, even if you're not an artist. So yeah, that was the video. I really hope that you guys enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.